As it's now quite clear that Labour has had the largest poll lead since 1997, that's greater, of course, than Cameron when he beat Gordon Brown. I think it's inevitable that the Conservatives will lose the next election. So it's simply a matter of when will Rishi go to the public. Now, one reason why there might be pressure on him to go earlier rather than later is because there's a fear of the Nigel Farage factor. A little bit of alliteration there. It's all F's with Nigel Farage, isn't it? And if Nigel Farage were to re-enter British politics, that would be a real stick of dynamite in the jacksie, and it would be far more disastrous than Lee Anderson going over to Reform. A Nigel Farage return, particularly as, rather like the Oscars, there is a feeling in politics that it's somebody's time. And I think if Nigel Farage were to enter national politics again, he would almost be guaranteed a seat because it's his time, and because I don't think the electorate would let him fail yet again. Now, I'm not saying that he should succeed. I'm just saying I think that it's likely that he would be gifted a seat. But we're in the same sort of period now that we were in with Gordon Brown in 2010, with John Major in 1997, and in 1992 actually, where there's anxiety about when the next election is going to be because the government is doing so badly in the polls. Now, of course, remember, in 1992, Major turned round and won that election despite the bad polling. He got on his soapbox. But today, the difference is there is nothing that has been achieved. Nothing has been achieved, and nothing is proposed except this illusion of putting people for £3,000 a head, of giving people £3,000 and a one-way ticket to a trip to Rwanda for people who have been denied asylum in this country, giving them a holiday. That is the only proposal that Rishi Sunak is reasonably going to come up with before the next election, other than paying off the debts that the post office has accrued, because the post office is proving incapable. It's about picking up pieces. It's about leaf picking, and it's not leaf picking in any sort of Thatcher photo call, where she got down and started picking up the litter. Oh, it's very important not to leave a mess, isn't it, dear? And can you imagine Rishi Sunak doing that? No. He would be giving orders. He wouldn't be getting down and dirty. Mrs. Thatcher got down and dirty because she knew it would create a good image. Rishi Sunak wouldn't know a good image if it came running up into his face. So it's not only the fact that Sunak is playing his worst hand because people are turning to him and expecting him to know how to deal with the public. He doesn't know how to deal with the public. He's an engaging and a charming man. I think he's essentially a very warm man who's being persuaded by the twits who run him, the PR people who run him in Number 10, to behave against character. Behaving against character. This is one of the problems with authenticity. And I was doing a little thing with BBC London yesterday, and I was asked a question. I didn't really answer it. Do I think authenticity is important? Yes. Yes, because there's only so far you can go by pretending to be somebody else. And Theresa May pretended to be somebody else. She pretended to be tough. In fact, all she did was embark on a transformation of the Home Office from a ministry which barely worked into a ministry that doesn't work. her idea of defiance was interpreted as indolence, and her idea of aping Mrs. Thatcher eventually spawned Liz Truss. This extraordinary. I shouldn't use the word too extraordinary too often because I get condemned for it. But this astonishing puppet of Mrs. May, Liz Truss, puppet with all the hand gestures. And when I was told that Liz Truss took training in gesturing, took acting lessons to try and get her gestures to be more coherent, to be more expressive, and she's still doing these hand jobs like this. It's just astonishing that she even survived a month. I wouldn't have given her a day with hand jobs of that quality. And Mr. May, Mr. Major was fairly wooden, and even he did better. Gordon Brown, wooden, and did better. Tony Blair, a natural performer. Mrs. Thatcher, a natural performer. Well, she wasn't particularly. She took advice, and she took advice because she was good at listening. And that's the one bit of the memoir and the biography and the autobiography and all the various bits and pieces which have been written about her, that these twits like Liz Truss and Theresa May don't pay attention to. Kemi Badenoch and Suella Braverman don't pay attention to that bit of Thatcher, because that's the bit which is hard, to listen to other people, to take advice, to digest it, and to use it. But Thatcher had the advantage. People thought that she was tough. The Soviet Union was already putting out this idea that she was the Iron Lady, that she was inflexible. So she could afford to be flexible because the public believed that she wasn't. When you look at Suella Braverman, flexibility, she has to work so hard to try and convince us that she's not flexible, that she is determined, that she is tough, because she looks as if she could be blown over, knocked down with a feather. She doesn't look tough. She looks like a playground bully. Once you stand up to her, she crumbles. The same thing, I'm afraid, with Kemi Badenoch. And certainly Liz Truss. Liz Truss, that any minute now, you think if you're going to stand up to her, if you're going to question her, that bottom lip is going to tremble and she's going to start crying. But Thatcher used tears, as indeed did Churchill. And as indeed did some of the great Labour politicians. And it's to Labour that we look for oracy, not to the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party has had so few great orators. One or two people like Thatcher were trained to speak, but even she got the timing wrong. It's when you look across the parliamentary divide to people like Michael Foot and the great Tony Benn that you find the real masters of political speech. And if you don't have great speaking, or if you don't have great personality, what you have is a void. And the media will fill that void. Speculation. The media will fill that void with speculation about how early or how late the poll is going to be. Is it going to be in May? Would a May election be worse than a November election? Have we ever had a January election? I can't think that we have, but maybe we have. And it's there is nothing of positivity. Even the trade agreement between Ankara and London, which is on the table, a free trade agreement targeting the service sector, even that's a bit of a damp squib, isn't it? Because none of this engages us emotionally. The only thing that engages us emotionally is the thought that we could vote and have some influence on the next government. But actually, that's already decided. Rishi Sunak has lost the next election. The world is waiting, the nation is waiting for some politician to engage us emotionally. And yet, politicians are taught, this is how you dress, this is how you behave, don't say too much. In the end, we've stifled political debate, we've stifled interest in this country by trying to get everybody to be as dull as possible so they don't make mistakes. And that means the mistakes that are made, those little mistakes, those tiny mistakes, are egged up to the point where they are political soufflés. And I don't think they're ever intended to be. I don't think, for example, the Frank Hester funding is that significant. I don't think even his comments against Diane Abbott, disgusting and deplorable though they are, would have been that significant even a couple of months ago, even if that had come out. But today, I think the Prime Minister's response to the Hester story catapults that story right into the political stratosphere. This is a story that could ultimately bring down the government. It just depends how it plays out over the next few weeks. Is this something that can be tossed aside? Yes, under normal circumstances, I think it is. And Rishi Sunak certainly intends to, but he's got nothing to replace it. There is nothing on the horizon that is more important than Frank Hester and Diane Abbott politically. So that story will keep going. And I think it will have a number of natural results. The sympathy for Diane Abbott will catapult her back into the Labour Party in a matter of days, if not weeks. And that will give her extraordinary prominence in the Labour Party in the run-up to the next election. It's the one thing that I suppose Keir Starmer doesn't want, but he's going to have to suck that one up. And the treasure chest which the Prime Minister is amassing through people like Frank Hester, I think could crumble. And I think at the last possible minute, the Prime Minister could find himself capitulating and having to pay back everything. And the chest will be empty. Would that chest make any difference? No. No. He should, if he spent just a little bit more, just as much time thinking about the future of our country and thinking about how to make our country work in a post-Brexit scenario, if he spent just a little bit of the time that he spends trying to hang on to power, trying to do some good and trying to make our country work, he would get a lot done. But his focus is on survival, and his focus is on his survival. He needs to admit that's gone. That ship has sailed. Now he has to think about his legacy and about the future. And yes, if he wants to hang on till November, fine, but make the most of the next few months that exist. And if he's not going to do that, he should go immediately.